Hello and welcome to the Tuesday morning, December 8th, 2020 edition of the Bobby Hesley Show. It is good to be with you all, and I've got your daily dose of hope, optimism, reason, research, education, and inspiration that you can only find here on the Bobby Hesley Show. Please like, comment, and share this video. Give me some like emojis, some love emojis, some laugh emojis if you think I'm an idiot, some angry emojis if you don't agree. Just engage. And if you have not done so, please subscribe to all my social media channels, which I make really easy to do in the description section. And you're really going to want to go over to my YouTube channel today and subscribe, which I'm also streaming on, because I have a link and a resource there that is going to give you some sanity and some education. So, folks, it is time for us to stop letting the media and the Democrats bully us and playing mind games with us. Stop letting them bully you and play mind games with you, folks. The media does not run this country, contrary to popular opinion. Now, on the surface, it seems like they do, because they're very influential, and let's face it, there's lots of low information voters who rely on the media to get all their information and education because they would rather take the path of least resistance so they don't have to learn and struggle and do research to keep themselves informed. Because, you know, people got to watch their Netflix, they got to watch their Amazon Prime, they got to binge watch, they got to do all the stuff that keeping yourself informed and being a scholar and a gentleman kind of cuts into and gets in the way of. But folks, I'm here to tell you, screw the December 14th deadline. To hell with the December 14th deadline. And I'm not being an anarchist by saying that. I'm not being un-American by saying that. I'm not being unconstitutional by saying that. As a matter of fact, all these people that are pushing December 14th, December 14th, December 14th as this certification deadline, they're actually the ones that are being unconstitutional about it. They are. Because the fact is, folks, December 14th, yes, that is the date when the electors meet to certify the President of the United States and to verify the winner of the presidential contest. Under normal circumstances, when there's no fraud and cheating, and when the elections are clean, smooth, and fair. But the fact is, the 2020 elections have not been that way. They have been rampant with fraud. Every day, every minute of every day, there's more evidence that's coming out of this rampant voter fraud, whether it's Dominion voting systems, whether it's mail-in ballot fraud, whether it's poll workers, whether it's election integrity experts. There is so much fraud coming out with all these sworn affidavits and video footage that even I'm starting to lose track, guys. And I'm really, I'm pretty good at staying on top of this stuff. But even I'm starting to lose track of all the evidence coming out. So the fact is, ever since November 3rd, ever since the night of November 3rd, the media and the Democrats have been trying to tell us something that is simply not true. For example, first, they stopped the counting before our very eyes. We all remember that. Then they prematurely declared Biden the winner on November 2nd while votes were still being counted in states. But they rushed and prematurely declared Joe Biden the winner. Very similar to when they said Dewey defeats Truman. I did a whole video on that on November 7th, where I went live right after the media declared Joe Biden the winner. And just because the media says that he's the winner, just because Fox News and Associated Press and whoever else says he's the winner, doesn't mean he's the winner. Then they started calling Joe Biden president-elect. And then Joe Biden ran with that and went to Office Max or Office Depot or whatever and paid $20 to get this fake sign that he puts behind his head that says Office of President-Elect, which there is no such office, folks. There is no such office as the Office of President-Elect. Then they said that there's no proof of voter fraud in spite of how much evidence came to light. That's another game that they're trying to play with us. That's another way that they're trying to gaslight us. And now they're trying to tell you that today, December 8th, marks the beginning of the end of the whole December 14th deadline. They're trying to say, oh, it's December 8th. Okay, so the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, or the Supreme Court that's going to hear the case in Pennsylvania, that doesn't matter because it's a day late and a dollar short because it happened on December 8th. But the fact is, guys, I'm going to read a piece to you that I have linked to on my YouTube channel that casts all that aside. It was written by the Amistad Project of the Thomas More Society. The Thomas More Society is a Catholic organization that fights to uphold constitutional law and to protect religious freedom in the United States. It's an incredible organization. And there's a white paper article that they wrote that I have linked to on my YouTube channel, which you'll have to go to subscribe in order to get access to it, to read the full thing. For the sake of time, I don't have time to read the whole thing today. But here's what it says. It says that the Supreme Court has ruled that the law does not actually require states to appoint electors by that date in order for those electoral votes to be counted by Congress when determining the winner of the presidential election, said a new white paper from the Amistad Project of the nonpartisan Thomas More Society, which is challenging the votes in several states. States rushing to brush aside President Trump's legal challenges to begin picking electors by Monday are being advised to slow down in a new advisory that says the only date the Constitution mentions, get this, folks, is January 20th, which is Inauguration Day. Get that, folks. To hell with all this December 14th crap. That is not in the Constitution. That's actually a federal law that was made back in 1948 or 1938, when the white paper goes into when it was made. And it was made for obsolete reasons that are no longer applicable today. But that's a federal law. But that federal law can be easily set aside by the Supreme Court. It's not binding, folks. Don't let the media and the Democrats make you think it is. January 20th is the day. Donald Trump has until January 20th to fight this thing to the bitter end, until noon of January 20th. And thank God that it's not Mitt Romney or John McCain or any of these other weak Republican presidential candidates, because they would have conceded on election night. They would have conceded on November 3rd. Donald Trump is going to stay in there and he's going to fight this thing to the bitter end, and he is fighting not only for himself, but he is also fighting for us as voters. And as I said in a previous podcast, believe it or not, and ironically, he is also fighting for all of you Democrats who would whine and riot and loot and shoot and burn black neighborhoods down to the ground if this thing were being done to you. He's fighting so that this isn't done to you in future elections, whether you like it or not. It continues, citing language in the famous Bush-Gore Supreme Court decision. The advisory said that while federal law sets 2 days in December for moving forward with the Electoral College voting, the Constitution doesn't. So don't think for a second, guys, that this December 14th date was named and enumerated by our founding fathers, because it wasn't. States are finishing certifying votes, and their electors get ready to cast their vote. At the same time, the Amistad Project of the Thomas More Society cautions that the pressure to wrap up the election by mid-December is not as clear-cut as previously thought. And this new white paper that was published by the group explains why. Now, again, you're going to have to go to my YouTube page if you want to see that whole white paper that was published. But like I said, we continue to be conditioned by the mainstream media of what I call their phantom constitution. It's almost like they have this phantom constitution. Just like, for example, they tricked millions of people into thinking that just because they declared Joe Biden the winner of the election, that he's president-elect and that it's over. It ain't over just because they say it's over. Joe Biden is not president until he is certified president. And the fact is, nowhere does the Constitution, which is what the Supreme Court is based on, right? The Supreme Court exists to uphold the Constitution. And nowhere does the Constitution say that the president must be certified by December 14th. That's just a fact, guys. Donald Trump has until noon of January 2020. January 20th, 2021. But the media doesn't know that. Or if they do, they are lying and suppressing the truth, because there's a Forbes article that I will cite from. And it says this: as is well known, President Donald Trump has refused to concede the election to Joe Biden and continues to file lawsuits to overturn the results. I hate it when they say overturn results, because that is not what's happening, folks. Donald Trump did not overturn the results of this election. The Democrats overturned the results of the election with their stealing and their fraud. You know what I call overturning the results of an election, folks? When you see a historic landslide, when you see a president who improved in every single category from his previous run in 2016. His support among black voters increased. His support among Latinos increased. His support among women increased. Every demographic except white men, actually, believe it or not. Donald Trump overperformed and improved his votes and his support in every demographic except white men. In other words, the only demographic that voted less for Donald Trump in 2020 than it did in 2016 were white men. Other than that, he killed it with the black vote. He killed it with the Latino vote. All the hard work that we were doing at Black Voices for Trump and all these other groups that were supporting Trump paid off. So overturning an election is when you're witnessing a historic landslide on TV and then all of a sudden the votes just come to a screeching halt and they stop counting everything. That's overturning an election. Overturning an election is when ballot stuffing, when ballots are trucked in at 4 a.m. when everybody's asleep in all these different cities, and every single ballot favors Joe Biden. That's overturning the results of an election. Overturning the results of an election is when dead people rise to vote yet once again for Joe Biden. That's overturning an election. Overturning an election is using fraudulent software that was created in Venezuela that helped Hugo Chavez and Maduro get elected, called Dominion Voting Systems, that flips votes away from Donald Trump to Joe Biden. That's called overturning an election. Overturning an election is prematurely declaring Joe Biden president-elect while states are still counting their votes 3 days after the election. That's overturning an election. Overturning an election is manipulating everybody into believing that it's all over on December 14th, even though the Constitution does not say that at all. It ain't over till January 20th, 2021 at noon. That's when it's over, which means Donald Trump still has about 6 weeks, about 5.5 to 6 weeks to fight this thing to the bitter end. And because he's Donald J. Trump, and because he's allergic to losing, and because he's addicted to winning, just like his voter base is addicted to winning, he ain't going nowhere until noon, January 20th of 2021. And that's supposing that he loses. A lot can happen in 5.5 to 6 weeks, folks. There's a lot of Supreme Court cases that are working their way up through the lower courts up to the Supreme Court that can be heard and ruled on by January 20th, one of which is today in Pennsylvania. As I'm doing this video right now, Donald Trump's legal team is arguing before the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania regarding Pennsylvania. And guess who's overseeing the District of Pennsylvania? Samuel Alito. Wisconsin cases can work their way up to the Supreme Court within 5.5 weeks. Guess who's overseeing things in Wisconsin? Amy Coney Barrett. Georgia A lot can happen in Georgia in the next 5.5 to 6 weeks that can work its way up through the lower courts to the Supreme Court. And guess who's overseeing things in Georgia in their district? Justice Clarence Thomas. A lot can happen in Michigan in the next 5.5 to 6 weeks that can work its way up to the Supreme Court. And guess who's overseeing things in Michigan? Brett Kavanaugh. Do not give up, folks. I'm going to say the same thing that I've been telling you guys since November 7th, when the fake news media falsely declared Joe Biden the winner. Hold the line. Do not quit. Do not give up. Do not concede. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that you have to concede on December 14th. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that Donald Trump has to concede on December 14th. That is a federal law that the Supreme Court will easily set aside. Why? Because it's not in the Constitution. Just because something is a federal law does not make it constitutional. That's the whole point of the existence of the Supreme Court, is to make sure that all federal laws observe the Constitution. It continues, but his fight, or at least any remotely realistic chance of winning it, comes to an end tomorrow. This is the fake Forbes article. It says, quote, the window for it closes tomorrow under a federal law. Now, this was written yesterday, so they're talking about today, actually. Under a federal law called, quote, the safe harbor provision. Now, notice how it says that it's under a federal law. It doesn't say under a constitutional law. It doesn't say under some clause in the Constitution or some article of the Constitution or some amendment to the Constitution. It says under a federal law called, quote, the safe harbor provision. I challenge any Democrat. I challenge any Rhino Republican. I challenge any member of the fake news media to whip out a copy of the Constitution and show me anywhere in the Constitution the phrase safe harbor provision. I'm waiting. Da, 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 da. I'm waiting. Listen, you don't have to get a paper copy of the Constitution. Go on Google, go online right now, pull up the United States Constitution. There's plenty of websites you can find that'll have the entire text of the Constitution laid out on a big long page that'll take you forever to scroll through because the Constitution's very big. And I encourage you to hit the control key and hit F as in Frank or F as in fine. So go to a Constitution website where you can find a draft, the text of the U.S. Constitution, right, that our soldiers bled and fought and died for, okay? Hit Control F, which will pull up the search bar, the search function, and just type in the phrase safe harbor provision. Let me know if you find anything. You won't. It's nowhere in the Constitution. So to hell with December 8th. To hell with December 14th. We don't accept that. The Supreme Court is most likely not going to accept that because we still have 5.5 to 6 weeks to challenge and fight this thing to the bitter end. It continues, called the safe harbor provision for all states that have certified their election results by tomorrow. Those certifications, quote, shall be conclusive and shall govern in the counting of the federal votes as provided in the Constitution. That is why it's so important that California put Biden over the top 2 days ago. It got its certification done just in time to put it in the safe harbor period, which expires tomorrow. Bunk. Where in the Constitution does it say that, Forbes? Huh? Where in the Constitution does it say that all chances of challenging an election expire? Well, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you some scholarly research. And I'm going to read a few sentences from this white paper, which, again, you can only find if you go over to my YouTube channel and subscribe, okay? I'm going to link all the sources there. Before I do that, please like, comment, and share this video. Subscribe to all my social media channels. It ain't over till it's over, folks. For everybody who is feeling hope and confidence with what I'm reading to you right now, with me putting things into perspective right now, let me see a 1 in the comments. I want you to throw up the number 1. If you're feeling hopeful and inspired and still willing to hold the line and stand behind our president that we voted for. We stood out in the cold for hours on end to go to these Trump rallies. We stood out in the cold, waited in line to vote for Donald Trump on November 3rd. Now is not the time to quit on President Trump. Let me see those ones, folks, if you're still in the game. If you still believe that it ain't over till it's over, let me see them ones. I want to read a piece to you by a gentleman by the name of Mark Serrano. He works with the Thomas More Law Center. And here's what he says. Let me just find the quote here. Here it is. So this is the first few sentences of this white paper. Here's the executive summary section. And again, if you want to read the whole thing, you can download the PDF by going to my YouTube channel. Here's what it says. The only electoral college deadline specifically required by the Constitution is on noon, January 20th. Not December 8th, not December 14th, not November 7th, not November 3rd. January 20th, according to the United States Constitution, which is the sole reason why the Supreme Court exists, to uphold that document. So anything that is not found in that document, anything that is at odds with that document, that constitutional document that our soldiers bled and died for, is going to be overturned and set aside. It continues, at which point President Trump's first term officially ends. Again, you would think that Donald Trump's first term ends on December 14th. With the way the media has been talking, this deadline that they've been bandying about, you think his term's going to be over in 6 days. But it ain't over till January 20th, folks. And that's assuming that he loses, which I still don't think he will. I still think that Donald Trump is going to win. I still think that we're going to pull this thing off. All other deadlines, it continues, the quote, safe harbor deadline of December 8th, the electoral college voting on December 14th, and even the congressional vote on January 6th are dates set by federal law, not by the Constitution, but by federal law. Again, just because it's federal law does not make it constitutional, folks. Now, we've always observed these dates and deadlines, because some of you are saying, well, what are you talking about, Bobby? We've been observing these dates and deadlines for decades, for over a century. And you're right. In fair elections where there's not rampant voter fraud. But has there ever been an election like this, folks? Has there ever been an election like the 2020 elections? Tell me, have there? By the way, there is legal precedent. I don't have time to get into this whole thing, but when you get some time, look into Rutherford B. Hayes. He was the 19th president of the United States. I believe it was in 1876. He wasn't sworn in until March 4th. There have been presidents that have gone beyond the January 20th because there were some electoral college disputes. Look that up when you get a chance. The white paper continues. Moreover, these dates are arbitrary, being based on obsolete and outdated concerns. Again, these dates were come up with, over half a century ago. It is also well established that the U.S. Constitution is the highest law in the land, holding precedence over both state and federal laws. In the event that federal law presents an obstacle to faithfully adhering to constitutional requirements, it is necessary to disregard the statute in favor of the plain meaning of the Constitution. That's what this white paper says, folks. And we have, thanks be to God, a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court. But because of John Roberts, the turncoat, it's actually a 5-4 majority. But we have Amy Coney Barrett in there, thankfully, so we can rule out the Roberts factor. We have 5 justices that I am confident will uphold the Constitution. And we have 5.5 to 6 weeks to get all these different cases to the Supreme Court. That's not forever. We don't have forever time, but we still have plenty of time, folks. Do not let the media defeat you into thinking that everything is over today. because it's the certification deadline to get all the electoral college votes in. That is a lie. That is not true, and that is not in the Constitution. I feel like I have to keep repeating myself because I don't feel like I can overemphasize that. Finally, it continues. It's going to talk about understanding the safe harbor provision, and then I'll kind of wrap up. I'm not going to go too long today on this video. Understanding the safe harbor provision. The so-called safe harbor provision in federal law, Title 3 U.S.C. 5, simply asserts that if a state has established laws governing the appointment of electors, and a determination made according to that law has been made at least 6 days prior to December 14th, the date fixed by federal law for the electoral college to convene, then that determination is final on December 8th. The Supreme Court has ruled that the law does not, get that the law does not actually require states to appoint electors by that date in order for those electoral votes to be counted by Congress when determining the winner of the presidential election. In the current context, states have laws in place awarding presidential electors according to the popular vote. Because the laws governing the vote were violated in numerous ways in several key states, certification of the election results cannot be said to have been made in accordance with the laws established in those states. Therefore, the responsibility still rests with the state legislatures to appoint their state's electors, because no determination made pursuant to such law has actually been made. Would you like me to translate that for you, folks? Would you like me to break that down into simple, everyday layman's language? It ain't over. If you want to get the full meaning of this, which I don't have time to get into, you got to head over to my YouTube channel and subscribe, and then look at the description section in this video, which is also being live streamed, and you can click on that link and you can download the PDF. So in closing, folks, because I'm not going to stay on here too long, you got to stay off the fake news media, guys, because all you're going to see on there is celebration and arrogant assumption that everything is over and has been called for Biden, and that he's basically just going to sail his way in there and that it's over. But the fact is, I believe that the Democrats are in for a rude awakening, because it's technically not over until noon, January 20th of 2021. We still have 5.5 weeks to go, folks. A lot can happen in 5 weeks. Do you know how much can happen in 5 weeks, folks? Look at everything that's happened in the last 4 weeks since the election. Look at all the fraud and all the evidence and all the proof that's come out that this thing has been stolen. It's come out at breakneck speed. And that was only a month ago. Can you guys believe that the election was pretty much only a month ago? A lot has happened since then. And you know what? A lot can happen in the next 5.5 to 6 weeks. So do not lose heart. Keep the faith. Hold the line. Do not lose hope. Do not get discouraged. Do not concede. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Tomorrow's show is going to be very informative. I'm going to have tomorrow's show is going to be more of an analytical show, kind of like yesterday's show was when I was talking about the history of Kamala Harris. Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about Black Lives Matter. And there's a lot of things going on within the Black Lives Matter juggernaut that are not boding very well for the organization that I'm going to cover in detail tomorrow. So let's just let things play out, folks. We got some Supreme Court hearings scheduled. A lot can happen in 5.5 weeks. Don't get discouraged. For those of you that are in the Detroit, Michigan area, my good friend Celeste Mentag is going to have a rally, a protest at the TCF Center tomorrow, December 9th, on Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. I may or may not be there. I've got a pretty tight schedule this week. But if you can make it, if you're in the Michigan area, we want to see you tomorrow at the TCF Center, where the center of all this fraud in Wayne County happened, where I made a 36-minute documentary video of me not being let in, even though I was a Michigan, a credentialed poll challenger with the Michigan GOP. Lots of the sworn testimonies that you've seen coming out in the Michigan Senate hearings were all based on people who were working at the TCF Center. So if you can make it tomorrow, be there 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. I may or may not be there. I'm going to try to make it, but I can't promise that I can make it. But I told Celeste that I'd plug it on my show, and I hope you guys can make it. So keep the faith, hold the line, do not surrender, do not retreat, and it ain't over till noon, January 20th of 2021. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We're going to call it a wrap, and I will catch you later.